Reflections is sponsored by Can Law Solicitors. We specialise in personal injury claims. Call us on 0141 378 0514. Can Law. If anyone can, we can.
हमने आँखों से देखा नहीं है मगर हमने आँखों से देखा नहीं है मगर उनकी तस्वीर सीने में मौजूद है जिसने लाकर कलामे इलाही दिया जिसने लाकर कलामे इलाही दिया वो मोहम्मद मदीने में मौजूद है फूल खिलते हैं बड़ बड़ के सल्ले अला फूल खिलते हैं बड़ बड़ के सल्ले अला झूम कर कह रही है इबादे सबा ऐसी खुशबू चमन के गुलों में कहाँ ऐसी खुशबू चमन के गुलों में कहाँ जो नबी के पसीने में मौजूद है हमने आँखों से देखा नहीं है मगर हमने आँखों से देखा नहीं है मगर उनकी तस्वीर सीने में मौजूद है जिसने लाकर कलामे इलाही
FM program Reflections. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Radio Ramadan 87.7 Reflections with your host Zubair Akram and my guest Sheikh Rizwan Muhammad. Today, inshallah, we are going to start with this program with some reflections, I think, straight into Surah Fil today. Yesterday, we discussed how to define peace of heart, itminan. What are the things that take away that peace, and what steps one can take to achieve that peace. And Sheikh gave a very detailed analogy of how in order to achieve itminan, you need to get rid of the dirt. You need to get rid of anything which is causing the clogging of your itminan, of your heart. And that piece of, say, that piece of chemical that can clean your heart is zikr. And then we started talking about what is zikr. Zikr is infaq, zikr is Quran, zikr is seeking for halal rizq, and zikr is also concentrating, muraqabah. So let's begin with just a recap of this, and then we will go into Surah Al-Fil and how this tasawwuf zikr ties in with the reading of Surah Al-Fil. Assalamu alaikum, Sheikh.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
So some of the key concepts were tawajjuh, marifa, interruption that I think we'll continue from where we had this interruption, inshallah. Sheikh. Yeah. So talking about these concepts that we had a recap, we would like to recap. Tawajjuh. You said something tawajjuh, and I noted it down, and I thought, okay, we'll spend some time on tawajjuh. What is tawajjuh?
Tawajjuh, I mean, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. So tawajjuh is focus. You can summarize it as being a type of focus. It can be gathering your intention together for a specific purpose, focusing in on something. And so tawajjuh is important in reflecting on the Quran as well, because even in our use of that, for example, in Urdu, you do say, use the word tawajjuh, and you ask people to concentrate and focus and complete attention. So if you're doing Surah Al-Fil and you're trying to understand the intent of the Quran, you're having to essentially give your full attention to what's happening. So that means that you would have to look at the recipients of the message, because that's essentially what we've been doing the last 5 sessions, which is looking at who's being asked to reflect and who's being asked to think and look. And that is a preliminary aspect of tawajjuh in terms of tafsir, for example. Also in terms of the background to the story itself, you have to understand why the chapter came when it came, because we talked about that as well in terms of tartib. So tawajjuh, in that sense, if you connect it to tafsir, is actually to bring together all of the issues that will allow you to focus on the intent of the one that is giving the message, which is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So tawajjuh in that sense is clear, but tawajjuh in terms of dhikr is to, again, do that in terms of focusing in on what you're mentioning, the names that you're mentioning of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the impact of those names upon you, and also to do it solely for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So there's no deflection of intent, there's no distraction of the sensory. And so tawajjuh is that ability or the attempt to create that complete unison between what you're saying, your remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and your intent. So there's a complete unison, complete synergy between the two. And that's the best way of actually even approaching even the Quran, because the Quran, as we said, is a type of dhikr, because it's a reminder, but it's also a recollection of, essentially, if you think of the Quran, it's almost like a structure which is created around either names or attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, either Allah's actions or God's attributes and descriptions, or Allah's names. And so if you think of that, you look at Surah Al-Fil, it comes up in Fa'ala Rabbuka, how your Lord, how your sustainer treated or dealt with the companions of the elephant. So even that is a dhikr, because you're bringing to mind the power of God. So you're actually reflecting over the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Al-Murid, Al-Qadir, Al-Muqtadir, Al-Muntaqim. So these are actually reflections on God's names, even the Quran itself, which is why it's so important when people read the Quran that they also try and set aside time for reflection.
So tawajjuh is attention, and it's not a technical word recognized in tasawwuf.
Yeah, tawajjuh is to focus in on the object of mention. So that's the primary meaning of it. Tawajjuh is to focus in on the primary purpose of your mention, which is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But also tawajjuh in a secondary sense is used technically to for the person to look into the origin of any notions or thoughts or ideas that come to the heart. So you have what are called khawatir. Khatira is like khatira is like, I don't know if you use it in Urdu, but khatira is something that comes to your mind or a memory. Okay, but khawatir in Arabic in the plural is used for the things that come to your mind in terms of inspiration and even whispering. So a khatira could be divine, it could be an inspiration from God, it could be angelic, it could be something that has a push towards a good meaning. It can be satanic. In other words, it comes from the external intent of the shaitan to actually misguide you. So the Quran says that about the shaitan. He says, I will definitely lead them astray. And one of the ways that is the whispering of the shaitan. And the last one is the khatira of the nafs, which is your own, if you're fasting now, there's a khatira somewhere deep down saying, wouldn't it be good to have a really cool cold glass of mango lassi or something, of that nature? So the khatir comes and goes.
Khatir in Urdu poetry it says khayale khatir ehbab chahiye. Khayale khatir ehbab. Yani when you are greeting someone, you greet with the utmost attention, attention to detail while in greeting. So ehsas khayale khatir ehbab chahiye.
Yeah, khatir is, but the khatir there is to be aware of the effect of something. So it's you're aware of the fact that you need to approach them with the best etiquette and decorum and manners, because you want to keep a good place in their heart for yourself, like in terms of how you present yourself. So khatira, is an interesting thing, because that's the second aspect of tawajjuh. Tawajjuh is
So is it the same as when you say So on the arrival of a guest, you say khatir tawazu kijiye. Khatir tawazu.
Yeah.
Khatir and tawazu. So that's like khatir
so
is
to be humble and to ensure that they go away with a good experience of your company. So that's the reason why you connect it to tafsir and the chapter we're looking at in terms of general discussion is that you have to read and reflect. So the reflection is a type of khatira. So when you read it, something that comes to you is a khatira. Like you could read a chapter of the Quran, and when you reflect upon it and you do tadabbur. Tadabbur essentially is the thought or the khayal that comes to your mind at the point that you're thinking about something. So something comes into your mind, you don't know where it came from. So the khatira is like either divine or angelic. When it's the Quran, your intention's clear and pure, and you're in a state of fasting. The tendency is that khatira is from divine inspiration or from the angelic. So this is why, if you did this show prior to Ramadan, it would be a complete, it would be really bad. I'm not saying it's good, but it would be a different, let's just say it's a different experience. Like the engine would have to, run in first gear. If you drive a car, it's in first gear. You would have to really struggle to get through, to think. But in Ramadan, there's something about the state of fasting. And we said that Imam Ghazali said that fasting, allows the impact of dhikr to be felt, which means the Quran as well can be reflected upon as well. Because this is why after fasting, you attend the Taraweeh, and the Taraweeh is there to be essentially digesting the Quranic revelation. Even if you don't understand the revelation in terms of Arabic, you're getting the waves of inspiration from that as well, which is why it's one of these things tied with fasting is the qiyam, the standing, you're seeking God's pleasure.
Khatir is another concept that you have introduced today. So tawajjuh.
This is way off topic anyway.
Is it really? Because
I don't know where you're going.
There'll be a connection with.
We need to make sure we finish the Surah Al-Fil before the end of Ramadan.
Okay, so inshallah we'll. I think there are 20 odd episodes. So Surah Fil. Let's hear the surah and its English translation.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم.
In the name of Allah, the entirely merciful, the especially merciful.
ألم تر كيف فعل ربك بأصحاب الفيل؟
Have you not considered, O Muhammad, how your Lord dealt with the companions of the elephant?
ألم يجعل كيدهم في تضليل؟
Did he not make their plan into misguidance?
وأرسل عليهم طيرا أبابيل.
And he sent against them birds in flocks,
ترميهم بحجارة من سجيل.
striking them with stones of hard clay.
فجعلهم كعصف مأكول.
And he made them like eaten straw.
रहमान रहीम, शुरू अल्लाह के नाम से जो बेइंतहा मेहरबान रहम फरमाने वाला है। तुमने देखा नहीं कि तुम्हारे रब ने हाथी वालों के साथ क्या किया? क्या उसने उनकी तदबीर को अकारत नहीं कर दिया और उन पर परिंदों के झुंड भेज दिए जो उनके ऊपर पकी हुई मट्टी के पत्थर फेंक रहे थे। फिर उनका ये हाल कर दिया जैसे जानवरों का खाया हुआ भूस। सदक़ल्लाहुल अज़ीम। So Surah Al-Fil, as we said, we will inshallah reflect on these ayahs. Just a recap on Sheikh on again the first ayah. Where was it revealed? Who is saying to whom, and its meaning to the people who they were recited amongst, and for us as well.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. So we kind of did cover the fact that it's fairly obvious that it's a Meccan surah. It's an early Meccan surah. It's from the first, 3 or 4 years of revelation. I think in terms of sequencing, probably in the second 10, probably 17, 18, 19, that kind of sequence in terms of the revelation of the Quran. And obviously it's there for tasalli of the Prophet ﷺ, consoling him, giving him solace, giving him strength. In the same way that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions this numerous times in the Quran in the early chapters, وَالضُّحَى وَاللَّيْلِ إِذَا سَجَى. These are examples where the Prophet is requiring consoling and encouragement and strengthening. And we said that was the what would the word be? The enthusiasm of the Prophet ﷺ to convey the message despite the difficulties he was facing was something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wanted him to relieve himself of. In other words, to not concern himself except for conveying the message. Innama alayka al-balagh. The only thing you have to do, Muhammad, is to convey the message. And that also meant the way the Prophet recited the Quran, he was enthusiastic, exuberant about the recitation of it initially when it came. He didn't allow it to settle. And Allah says, La tuharrik lisanaka lita'ajala bih. Do not, hasten your tongue to do not move your tongues to hasten the recitation thereby. In other words, let it settle, let it be consolidated, and then recite it. In other words, it's not going to be lost, it's not going to be forgotten. And so this is part and parcel. This chapter is part and parcel of tasalli. And we also mentioned the fact that you have to then first of all look at the context. Is it addressing the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam? Is it addressing us? Is it addressing the Quraysh? Each of those aspects gives a completely different vista, different entry into the chapter. Because if you say it's revealed for us in 2026, and we're thinking about it, we're thinking essentially what you said, which is the ability of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to vanquish the armies of oppressors, and that's perfectly okay. You can take that message away. You can take it as being the Prophet ﷺ is being directly asked to reflect, Alam tara kayfa fa'ala Muhammad, because it is in the singular, the Arabic. It means you, O Muhammad. And some of the translations actually mentions in brackets Prophet ﷺ. And from that perspective, we know the Prophet didn't see it, but it's a question of reflection. And even actually, if you think about it, the Prophet ﷺ, when he's receiving this, he is receiving it while he has just come out of a very successful period of trading. And so, this will come up in this chapter and the next chapter, Surah Quraysh, where the benefit of the vanquishing of Abraha, which is the name we'll come to, the army of the elephant, the benefit of that was seen by the Quraysh and the Prophet himself, because he went on the trade routes. Remember, one of the earliest issues in Sirah is he goes to Syria and with his uncle, and that ability to go and trade and commerce and come back and go on the trade routes was a freedom that was very rare. And so when Allah is saying Alam tara kayfa fa'ala rabbuka bi ashab al-fil, within that is this idea that Abraha essentially came to disrupt, as we'll see, the trade route and to decimate the Quraysh and also decimate Mecca from the map, so that nobody would actually pass through it as a destination. And that if they wanted to go and trade, they would have to take armies, they would have to take warriors and soldiers to protect their trade route. But that didn't happen, because something very interesting happens, which is Ila fi Quraysh. Ila fi Quraysh is actually, when we come to it, is actually a very well-known agreement that was brokered by the Quraysh as a result of this. And this essentially led to them being able to travel and trade freely. So think of the Prophet ﷺ, it's related to him, and it's asking him to reflect. And the fact that Wallahu ya'asimuka minan nas, God will protect you from people, is that sense of safety, security, tranquility, and also economic prosperity, stability, because the Prophet benefited, as the Quraysh did, from that trade. And that trade only happened because of this event of Ila fi Quraysh, which is the people. And then we also said that it can also relate to the recipients of it. First of all, are the Quraysh themselves. And from that perspective, it's interesting because it's almost like a admonishment. It's almost like in Arabic you call it tawbih, which is to bakh in Arabic is basically, go away. It's like a humiliation and a wake-up call, because it's telling them you're benefiting from the safety that you have and the prosperity that you have and the stability that you have on the back of something you had no hand in, and in fact you were unable to deal with yourself. Who dealt with it? God. Where is his sanctuary? Under your control. What have you got in the sanctuary? Idols. So this ties in indirectly with, it's like it's ta'rid in Arabic, which is to do a slight indication towards something not mentioned. And the thing that's not mentioned is that how can you worship idols and place them into the Kaaba when you were unable to protect yourself from an army, and it was God himself who, through your witnessing of the event and knowing the event, because you have Abu Quhafa, you have other elderly members of the Quraysh that experienced exactly that. They experienced the fact that the Quraysh were there unable to defend themselves, and they had to be saved by a miraculous, almost unknown agent who was able to protect them. And that's essentially what, if you look at it from the perspective of who's being spoken to, is that it's the Quraysh. And they will have to think about this. They will have to think, we didn't do anything for our sanctuary. The idols didn't come to protect us. It was God. And so it actually brings lots of interesting points in, because the Quraysh essentially weren't even, I think, that concerned about the worship of idols. They were concerned about prosperity. And that the idols, the presence of the idols protected them as a center that couldn't be attacked by other tribes, because the other tribes had their idols in amongst the Kaaba as well. So it's almost like hostages. If you want to really make it into a mockery, it's almost as if the Quraysh have taken the idols of the other tribes as hostages, and so they can't attack Quraysh. And also they have this safety and a money-making scheme almost, that people come, and then because their idols are there, they're able to prosper. And so the Quran is essentially addressing the Quraysh from that perspective as well. They will have to then mull over that. And it'll be interesting because...
So all of this attitude is frowned upon. It's not the desired attitude towards life. That if they are using religion for as a money making machine, it was religion of the time. Yeah,
and it's not actually, as it were, it's not. There's religions now. I mean, Islam would be amongst them. They have people that practice Islam, but use the religion itself as a means of making, extorting money from people. If you look at the shrines of great awliya, for example, you have what they call them, Gaddanashin or something, the person who takes the seat.
Yeah.
So you have some illiterate son of a very famous, perhaps a famous scholar, or maybe not the father was famous, maybe the great like 3 centuries prior to that, very
Sajjada
famous
Nashin.
yeah.
Sajjada Nashin.
So Gadda Nashin is what?
Gaddi is as well. So a more refined version. Sajjada Nashin.
Sajjada. Oh yes, if you want, I don't want to give him that honor. See, this is the difference between me and you.
Allah.
I'm a bit more blunt from Glasgow, so Gadda, yeah, Gaddi Nishin, yeah, absolutely. I understand your perspective. You're much more refined. Yeah. So what were we saying? Yes. So a person who brought thousands of people into Islam, thousands of Hindus and Buddhists into Islam, done so much work for Allah for the sake of Him, fasted, prayed, brought the religion of God to people that were unlettered. Then essentially, people take on the mantle of that person because they're buried somewhere, and build a complex around it, and then they live off the charity that's given to the place, and then they basically essentially use it because they have control over the grave, and then the grave is a center of pilgrimage, and the pilgrimage requires housing and food and all these things, and they might provide some soup or something, but essentially the majority of it is siphoned off for personal benefit. And so it's not an old thing, it's not old thing to use the spiritual pull of something to gain religious benefit. So that's also within this mix. And I think one of the primary motives of the Quraysh wasn't their belief, because I think their belief, when the conquest of Mecca happened, their belief did flip very quickly. If it was such a deep belief, and I've thought of this a long time, if the Quraysh and their polytheism was so deeply entrenched and a matter of creed, they wouldn't have left it. They would have allowed them to be themselves to be tortured if they believed it to be true. Like Sayyidina Bilal allowed himself to be tortured, allowed himself to be, put into the most dire situation physically and emotionally and psychologically. But he didn't renounce anything. He just said, Ahadun, Ahadun, the one, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The Quraysh should have done that. They should have sworn by Allat wal Uzza wa Manat al-Thalitha. They should have done what Surah An-Najm mentions about these tribes, these idols, but they didn't, which means that there's a worldly benefit that they are attached to. And the Quran is actually tying, calling their bluff in some way by mentioning this incident, because the incident is one which unravels their claim to have divine protection, because the Prophet ﷺ he is coming in the name of the one that sent Ababil. He is the one that comes in the name of the one that decimated the people of the elephant. And so then the Prophet ﷺ, his hand, in terms of his move now, is much stronger. And what's interesting, I was actually going to mention that this is tied in with the next chapter, which is Surah Quraysh. But there's a distance between the two chapters. There's a distance, I think probably about 10 other chapters were revealed between them. And you can think that, when we look at the chapter and what it means, but basically everybody who's listening probably knows the chapter. I don't imagine anybody doesn't. They're probably thinking, Sheikh, can you just tell me what the chapter is about? The elephant comes, head of an army, to destroy the Kaaba. God destroys it. End of story. That's a simple, straightforward. God destroys it. And so the Quraysh, when they know this story and they know the intricacies of it as well, in living memory, they're now thinking, okay, what does it mean for us? Because the Prophet is not going away. This person who claims to be a prophet is not going away. They're thinking, they're trying to sleep. They're having their nadwa, where they come and they discuss what to do. And they are sweating. And essentially, Allah will then reveal Li'ila fi Quraysh, which will, it's such a beautiful thing. The turn from that trepidation and fear that the Quraysh must have had at the end of the Surah Al-Fil will be softened by the chapter which will be Quraysh, which we'll talk about later, which is about the blessings that Allah has given the tribe itself. So it could be, as I said, it could be about a very archaeological dig into who these people were, Abraha and Quraysh and the people that were there. And so it's just essentially an advertisement about the blessing of being from the Quraysh, Al-A'immatu min al-Quraysh, as the Prophet and his Prophet have said. The leaders are from the Quraysh. Or it can be a much deeper thing for everybody, which is, at one level, how to approach somebody who is obstinate and your enemy by giving them the fear and then the ease. Like they say, I was speaking to somebody yesterday about something, and they were talking about good cop, bad cop. There was a situation where constantly there was a good cop and a bad cop in reality, and it was quite funny listening to him because he didn't know what to do, because he wasn't sure how to respond, because one moment there'd be somebody that came in, start kicking the table and saying you're done for, and then the next moment somebody comes in, don't worry, I don't agree with this either, just you'll be okay, would you like what would you like to eat, I'll make sure you get what you want to eat, and the next person comes in, starts slamming the door. So this is where the Quraysh are going to be in these two chapters, because initially it's fear, because if God can do this to,
I mean, this is a description of Oval Office. Like, 1 minute you are, go away.
It's in Trump's head. Yes. So no tariffs, 100% tariffs.
Yeah.
I hate this person. I love this person.
Yeah.
So like Mamdani in Trump's Oval Office.
Yeah.
So my point is, he's onto something, and this is what I think a lot of people don't understand in terms of communication. Even politicians or people in public office, or Muslims that are in these kind of situations, you have to be much more savvy in your communication strategy. I was speaking to somebody recently who's a specialist in communication strategy, which we both know, and I was kind of talking to him about the fact you have to vary your way of technique and communication. So the Quran does that. The Quran keeps the Quraysh on their toes. And it's not just the Quraysh, it's going to be for us. I think it's a massive learning curve. If you see that the fear, then comes وَآمَنَهُمْ مِنْ خَوْفٍ is the end of the chapter Quraysh.
Yeah. I think it's perfect. Inshallah, an ad break, and then we'll come back and talk about more on how this is communicated, how it's taken. Reflections with Sheikh Rizwan Muhammad on Radio Ramadan. An ad break, and we'll be right back, inshallah.
Reflections is sponsored by Can Law Solicitors. We specialise in personal injury claims. Call us on 0141 378 0514. Can Law. If anyone can, we can. Reflections is sponsored by Can Law Solicitors. We specialise in personal injury claims. Call us on 0141 378 0514. Can Law. If anyone can, we can.
हमने आँखों से देखा नहीं है मगर हमने आँखों से देखा नहीं है मगर उनकी तस्वीर सीने में मौजूद है जिसने लाकर कलामे इलाही दिया जिसने लाकर कलामे इलाही दिया वो मोहम्मद मदीने में मौजूद है फूल खिलते हैं बड़ बड़ के सल्ले अला फूल खिलते हैं बड़ बड़ के सल्ले अला झूम कर कह रही है इबादे सबा ऐसी खुशबू चमन के गुलों में कहाँ ऐसी खुशबू चमन के गुलों में कहाँ जो नबी के पसीने में मौजूद है हमने आँखों से देखा नहीं
Just before the break, we touched upon this very kind of latif point, a very delicate point of how the tone of Quran changes, and the recipient knows that this tone is for a purpose. Sheikh, is that I'm trying to think how I can understand what Trump does, and how is it? How can we relate to these ayahs ألم تر كيف فعل ربك بأصحاب الفيل ألم يجعل كيدهم في تضليل. Are we saying that the tone also was received accurately by Quraysh?
Yes, yeah. So that's the thing. So that you have to look at who the chapter is directed to, because it's asking a question, and we said it's a rhetorical question, which is essentially for taqreer, which is not to ask yes or no. You know that you experienced it. You have people who saw it. You lived through it, and so it's not about that. It's about how do they then process it and listen to it and respond to it, because it's directly initially for them, and we're viewing them actually. So actually, when the beginning of the show, when the recitation was being recited, I was thinking the tonation of the reciter. I think it's I don't know who it is, but the tonation of the reciter actually was giving a type of a tafsir, which is a tafsir of what's meant by the verses, by the tone of how he enters into each. Tarmihim bihijara. When he entered into that, it's like causation. So the tone he used was causation, whereas, I mean, if it doesn't need to be like that. So the Quran is very complex. So if I heard that, I would be given the commentary and what the verses meant in terms of what's happening, who's doing what, and what the place of, for example, the birds pelting the army. Is that there is the cause of the death of and destruction of the army, or is that something that came accompanying the destruction of God through other means, for example? That comes from the tonation of the voice itself. And so here, when there's a qari here whose voice, and not voice, is ilqa, his rendering and it's like his placing of the voice on the verses is the best I've ever heard in my life, to be honest, because he actually gives the tafsir while he's through the tone in connecting the chapters, the verses, and the specific grammatical parts that can be connected to one part or another. He connects them in a way that tells you if they are the state of the person, or they're essential to the verse or whatever. So this is very something that most people don't think about. They think the Quran is just like a book. In English, you read it from beginning to end. The Quran is extremely complex. And so if that's me just listening to the recitation of Quran in Taraweeh, you can imagine the Quraysh were given it. Essentially, it's like Trump doing a, وَلِلَّهِ الْمَثَلْ الْأَعْلَى. This is not to make the comparison, but you can understand the analogy, which is press conference, and it's like, you better be ready. We're sending frigates, and we're ready to put boots in the ground, and X, Y, and Z, and the other countries like completely going crazy. And then all of a sudden, the next day, they're our best friends. We have lovely relationship with the Iranian. We can do a deal. Yeah. And so, what's the psychological effect on? I've got Iranian people I know here, who just lose their mind, and then the next day they're totally calm. Like they're planning their next year based upon Trump's press conference, and the next day they're saying, "Okay, we don't have to move. Okay, we're going to invest here." So everything changes. You have to understand the Quran did that with the Quraysh. It told them, "Look, you better behave yourself, because look what happened. I'm not saying I'm going to do it. God's not saying I'm going to destroy you, but you know what happened very close to here, and you were the beneficiaries of it, but you didn't actually do anything." And as we see the story of it, you didn't do anything. You just, you basically, like Ta'if, the tribe of Ta'if, Bani Thaqif, they actually helped, gave guides to Abraha to get him the best direction to Mecca. Like some of them just caved in and just went on along with the journey. Like a lot of Muslim countries, imagine America's about to bomb there's a lot of Muslim leaders and countries that would just say, "Okay, yes, we're with you, so you don't bomb us." So it's like the Arabs say, "I was eaten the day that the white ox was eaten," because there's a story of 3 oxes, and the lion comes and speaks to them and says to them, "Look, I'll leave both of you. Just let me eat the black one." And it eats the black one, and then the next day the lion said, well, not next day, but later on, because lions eat very rarely. And then the next time it's approached the two, one of them, and said, look, the other one, the yellow one's there, leave me, and I'll, I won't touch you, I'll eat the other one, then there's only the one left. So that ox was dead the day the first ox died. So that's kind of something that's like a common parable that comes up in different cultures. But
Actually,
here,
what you just mentioned, sorry about the intonation. Can we just hear the surah again? I don't think
you won't pick it up. I mean, because you have to look at then what's the possible other readings of it, because that goes into archaeology. It goes into medicine, actually, in terms of what caused the death of the army. But the way that was recited was essentially, we can do that once we've gone through get to the point where we give alternative interpretations.
Yeah. So alam tara kayfa fa'ala rabbuka. So the communication here, that actually, while you were saying, and I was thinking that every piece of social art actually stems from Quranic verses. Your diplomacy, your geopolitics, the way communities should or have spoken to each other. People are threatened, people are in fear, people are victorious. So anyone who's anything in this day, in this world, has had some kind of knowledge imbibement from Quran.
Well, it resonates. I mean, in terms of this communication technique, the Quran is rhetorically the most powerful book you can get because it has that impact now. But I think to really understand its impact, you have to think, when you read a verse, who is it directed to? How is it being said? What's the language? How is the language constructed to say it? And what is the desired effect of that in the listener who was listening to it when it was given? And if you observe it like that, it just becomes a completely different experience in terms of the Quran. Because then once you've understood that, you've captured it, you essentially get the essence of how it's done, the technique. Then you can extract it. That's what I did with the idea of Trump, and which is basically, I've got the idea, and I'm saying, well, there it's there, it's being used there, it's being used there, and it's being used effectively by other people, not by ourselves. So I mean, these are things that there was actually, just to my mind came to mind. There was, they say that the Quran contains around 500 or so verses that are related to ahkam, which is rules, and there was fiqh. So they say ayat al-ahkam. There's around 500 verses out of over 6,000 that are related to acting in terms of halal, haram, and this is do this and don't do that. But essentially, scholars say, look, all the Quran is there to drive rulings. So you said international relations, geopolitics, negotiation. These two chapters, I can imagine a scholar advising a governmental body or a president and saying, look, this is how you deal with this situation, because look, you not understand Surah Al-Fil and Surah Quraysh, how God wanted to get a result, a response, and this is how he did it. In other words, good cop, bad cop. Because you won't understand what that means until you go through the tafsir. This is how you have to approach this, because you can't just be you can't be transparent in your communication style. And
I mean, even the fact that you're saying that you need to have an outcome in mind before you start your tactics.
Yeah, of course. What do you want? Like, imagine you've got children, teenage or just adolescent, and for some reason there's not communication between you and the child. Now you have to now think, how do I deal with this child who's rude? Or let's just say that again. This child is not conforming to what I expect the child to do. You might think it's rude, but the child might not think it's rude because they're going through hormonal things or just thinking, and they're not aware of exactly how they're behaving. Your purpose is to look at the outcome, not, okay, you need to do X, Y, Z, A, B, C, and then result. No, you're looking at result. And how's that work now? It is essentially like in adolescence, the relationship changes and you're essentially there to just ensure they don't fall off the motorway. Like you have to have these barriers, and you're basically steering them when needed through those very difficult, 2 or 3 years. And when they get into like late teenage, 18, 19, and they realize and reflect on the fact that the parent was there making sure they didn't go off the rails by just small interventions, but not dictating and not disciplining, because we're very counterproductive. They will then reflect and realize, my parent had my best interests at heart, and that 17, 18, 19, that age, they will think, okay, I'm gonna this is an important person in my life. And you think, of course, I'm your parent, but at that point, it's not going to get through. And this is essentially what's happening with the Quraysh. I think they're being told, and they're being communicated to in a very threatening. There's this sense of foreboding that look what happened. We Al-Fil ma'kul, as chewed up, kind of wheat stalks. I think he's total destruction. Even that metaphor is so fascinating, because the Quraysh didn't know that. They don't have agriculture. So how would they know what that means, and why would they realize what that is? That's a different point. The point is, there's a communication strategy here as well. Strategy meaning wisdom. When we talk about Quran, we talk about
if there was a manual to be written, Art of Diplomacy, this surah.
I did do a course called Art of Persuasion.
Art of Persuasion. Okay.
Yeah, the prophetic art of persuasion. I did do like a 12 session course on that. It was out of that, the way the Prophet communicates and how he gets the result he wants from varied means of interacting and speaking and communicating with people.
But this
with
is
an
next
eye
level.
on the goal.
Yeah,
it's amazing. It's absolutely amazing.
Yeah, but this extraction of meaning is next level. Alam tara kayfa fa'ala rabbuka bi ashabil fil alam yaj'al kaydahum fi tadlil. I think I have a better way of understanding when I read in Urdu. Allahu Akbar.
So the translation you used was actually very good. I mean, I don't know which translation, but it actually encompassed a lot of the.
तुमने देखा नहीं कि तुम्हारे रब ने हाथी वालों के साथ क्या किया? क्या
कैसे किया? So there I would say कैसे
तुमने देखा नहीं कि तुम्हारे रब ने हाथी वालों के साथ क्या किया? So it's implied कि तुम्हारे रब meaning is Prophet sallallahu being addressed here कि तुमने देखा नहीं, ए मोहम्मद क्या तुमने देखा नहीं सल्लल्लाहु कि तुम्हारे रब ने हाथी वालों के साथ क्या किया?
See, I would say, like, what did he do? I would say, how did he do? Because
no. In Urdu, kya kiya means this.
Means what?
Means उसके साथ क्या हो गया? Meaning is not what happened. What's hidden here is कि do you not know the catastrophe that happened, or the
so
big...
it's not the event. So in we'll come to this later, but the kaifa is they know it happened. It's reflecting over the mechanism, the cause and effect of how it happened. Because yeah,
exactly. So it's not the event. It's not.
Because we would say the event.
Well, the hidden here is the
decimated elephant. So that we would say is the event, but it's the way it happened.
The way it
and
happened.
The story behind it. Yeah.
उनके साथ क्या हो गया? Meaning it has all the scenery in it. All the detail in it, how it all happened, the extent of it. हाथी वालों के साथ क्या किया? क्या, and the explanation is क्या उसने उनकी तदबीर को अकारत नहीं कर दिया? So what they had planned was countered. Or अकारत अकारत मतलब बेकार कर दिया. अकारत is it had no relevance. खत्म हो गया. जो कुछ सोचा था वो नहीं हो सका. जो कुछ प्लान करके आए थे वो मुमकिन नहीं हुआ. So लेकिन इसमें again I will try to understand कि communication कहाँ से आ गई, क्या यानी धमकी कहाँ पे है? Where is the threat here? Because
it sources itself from who you're imagining is listening to it. Who is it given to? Is it the Prophet ﷺ? Or is it to the Prophet and the Quraysh are being told to listen into this? Because how is it communicated? The Prophet is reciting it to the companions, and the companions have conveyed it to the Quraysh. So it's almost another layer would be they're watching the Prophet ﷺ being told almost privately by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, did you not see how God dealt with? So don't worry. And imagine the CIA is listening into your thing and they hear that you're calm and collected now because you know that you'll be victorious. They're going to get fearful. Why is Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam so now sure of the promise of God? Now they'll get worried. But also we can all say that the Prophet recited it to them and said, did you not see how God dealt with the people that tried to attack the Kaaba? And I am the one that's representing God, and you're dissociating yourself from me, torturing me and torturing my followers. What do you think God will do to you? Because you're doing the same thing that Abraha did. And so that's the threat. The threat is, this is the power of God against people that seek to oppress the sanctity of the sacred precinct, which is established just for the worship of one God. Who's calling for the worship of one God? It's the other person, the Prophet, Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And how are you dealing with him? You're not dealing very well. You're getting 0 marks. So what do you expect is going to happen? That's the tense threat underlying just reflecting over a historical episode that happened, 40 years, 50 years prior to that. Well, 43 years prior to that. Because what we'll say is that year is also the year in which the Prophet ﷺ was born.
Al-Fil. Al-Fil. Threat samajh aa gayi. Okay. Let's take it slowly. And how are they drawn in? Are they drawn in with this ayah as well?
Yeah, because they're drawn in because in some way it seems to vindicate the Quraysh and their state, that they're in a very sacred land. So they could hear it and they could say, well, we're in a very sacred land, a protected land, under divine protection. And they do believe in God. It's just that they believe that there's lots of idols and intermediaries between them and God. So from that perspective, they do have this, sense of security as well, that this is a protected land. But the foreboding is when they start to think about who was the one, what was the entity that protected the sacred Kaaba? Why was that done? And did they have any hand in that at all? That's where the foreboding comes, because they're basically at a certain point going to be helpless. And that will happen when, you can imagine the resonation of this. Abu Quhafa, who is the father of Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, he lived the time, and we haven't been through the story of Abraha and the elephant yet. He lived at the time when the Quraysh said to all the people in Mecca, leave and watch from the valleys, watch from the mountains. Okay. And Abu Quhafa had to, again, at that point he was blind. He had to go into the essentially leave the city, because what happened at the end of his life, the Prophet ﷺ came and he entered into the city with a large army, entered into it and was given a free entry into it. Like Abraha is on the one hand stopped almost supernaturally, and on the other hand, the other entry of an army into Mecca will be one which will be victorious, with no blood spilt and no threats made. And so the contrast there is, of divine protection and support, and on the other hand, divine intervention and destruction. So there's lots of layers that if you were, alive at the time, it would underline the protected nature of the Prophet ﷺ, because, you've got the landed power of Abraha from Yemen, and we look at how that whole empire came into being. The Quraysh, who have the landed power of trade and commerce. Then all of a sudden, there's the message of the Prophet ﷺ, which is all about the fact that you have to sort your relationship with God. That relationship also impacts people and your oppression of people, and your making use of religious symbols for financial gain and oppression, all these things. And so just replace all these other issues with the worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so that's, essentially one aspect, entry into the chapter.
ریفلیکشنز پروگرام، میں ہوں آپ کا ہوسٹ زبیر اکرم، اور میرے مہمان ہیں شیخ رضوان. ہماری اس سال کی ریفلیکشنز کی 2 صورتیں ہم نے منتخب کی ہیں. ایک ہے سورۃ الفیل، 105 نمبر صورت ہے قرآن حکیم کی، اور ایک ہے 106 نمبر سورہ قریش. الم تر کیف فعل ربک باصحاب الفیل الم یجعل کیدہم فی تضلیل. اگر صرف انہی 2 آیات پہ اب تک کی جو کانورسیشن ہوئی ہے، تم نے دیکھا نہیں کہ تمہارے رب نے ہاتھی والوں کے ساتھ کیا کیا، کیا اس نے ان کی تدبیر کو اکارت نہیں کر دیا. اور یہ پچھلے 5 سیشنز میں جو چیز ابھر کے سامنے آتی ہے کہ قرآن میں جس قدر غوطہ زن ہوں، اتنے ہی معنی کے جو موتی ہیں وہ سیپ سے نکالے جا سکتے ہیں. اور اب تک جو ہم سمجھتے آئے، یا ایک عامی کے طور پہ قرآن کو اپروچ کرنے سے جو ہمیں سمجھ میں آیا، وہ یہ کہ ایک بہت تکڑی فوج ہے، اس نے اللہ کے گھر پہ حملہ کیا، اور اس گھر کے جو متولی ہیں ان کی مدد کے لیے خدا نے خود جھنڈ کے جھنڈ جو ہیں وہ پرندوں کے بھیج دیے، اور انہوں نے چھوٹی چھوٹی کنکریوں سے ایک بہت بڑے لشکر کو، جو کہ ہاتھیوں سے اور مسلح تھے لوگ، ان سے مسلح تھے لوگ، ان کو نہ صرف یہ شکست دی بلکہ ان کو ایک بھس کی شکل میں، کھائے ہوئے بھس کی شکل میں اللہ تعالیٰ نے کر دیا اور اپنے گھر کو بچا لیا. لیکن جو خاص لطیف نقطہ شیخ نے ہمیں سمجھایا وہ یہ کہ جہاں یہ سب باتیں درست ہیں، وہاں یہ دیکھنے کی بھی ضرورت ہے کہ اس میں کیا کہا گیا، کس کو کہا گیا، اور سنایا کسی کو جا رہا ہے اور سمجھایا کسی اور کو جا رہا ہے. سو سنانے میں اور سمجھانے میں جو باریک فرق ہے وہ یہ ہے کہ اس میں ایک بہت لطیف سی دھمکی ہے قریش کو. اگرچہ ان کی حفاظت کے لیے قریش کو بچایا گیا تھا 40 سے 45 برس پہلے اس واقعے سے، لیکن اس واقعے میں انہی کو ڈرایا جا رہا ہے اس واقعے کی وجہ سے کہ جس میں ان کو پہلے بچایا گیا تھا، کہ ایسا ہوا اور تم نے پھر بھی سبق نہیں لیا. ہمارے اس پروگرام میں اس وقت اشتہار کا وقفہ، اس کے بعد دوبارہ آپ کی خدمت میں حاضر ہوتے ہیں.
سے دیکھا نہیں ہے مگر ہم نے آنکھوں سے دیکھا نہیں ہے مگر ان کی تصویر سینے میں موجود ہے، جس نے لا کر کلام الہی دیا، جس نے لا کر کلام الہی دیا، وہ محمد.
Reflections is sponsored by Can Law Solicitors. We specialise in personal injury claims. Call us on 0141 378 0514. Can Law. If anyone can, we can.
اس پہ غور کیا وہ یہ تھا کہ جس طرح سے اس صورت کو ہم پڑھتے ہیں، سورۃ الفیل مختصر صورت ہے، 5 آیات پہ مشتمل ہے، اور اس میں ایک بظاہر ایک ہسٹوریکل واقعہ جو ہے وہ پیش کیا گیا، اور اس سے ہم یہ سبق لیتے ہیں کہ مظالم کتنے بھی بڑھ جائیں، اگر اللہ کا گھر جو ہے وہ انڈر اٹیک ہوگا یا لوگ اٹیک میں آ جائیں گے تو اللہ تعالیٰ خود ابابیل بھیج کے، پرندوں کو بھیج کے ان کا بھرکس نکال سکتا ہے. लेकिन शेख ने जो हमें तवज्जो दिलाई वो ये है कि इससे ऊपर, इससे नीचे, इसके दाएँ, इसके बाएँ, इसकी गहराई में भी चीज़ें सोचने की हैं। और सबसे बड़ी चीज़ जो आज सामने आई वो ये कि अ, इसमें बहुत लतीफ़ किस्म की धमकी शामिल है कुरैश को कि तुमने खुद ही मुशाहिदा किया चंद ही साल पहले कि तुम्हारे साथ क्या होने जा रहा था और खुदा ने किस तरह से बाजी पलट दी। और अब जो तुम करने जा रहे हो वो क्या है? लेकिन ये धमकी बहुत लतीफ़ है। शेख सो कम्युनिकेशन अगेन लर्निंग फ्रॉम कुरान इफ वी आर एज इकबाल कहता है कि हम तो माइल बकरम हैं कोई साइल ही नहीं राह दिखलाएं क्या राह रो मंजिल ही नहीं यानी कोई काबिल हो तो हम शान किए देते हैं ढूंढने वाले को दुनिया भी नहीं देते हैं यानी सीम्स के कोई है ही नहीं कोई है ही नहीं यानी देयर इज नो वन इफ पीपल actually understood Quran would we be in this position that we are in
Yeah.
just a small thing of what you pointed out. Are we saying that people never contemplated on Surah Fil this way? I mean, this teaches us it's a whole manual. It is art of diplomacy.
Yeah. Yeah. Art of communication, art of diplomacy. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, very powerful.
Yeah. So that's so. Yeah, I did kind of mention Quran. Upon reflection, has lots of things. There was actually, you asked about tawajjuh. There was actually, I don't know how much time we have before iftar, but this issue of tawajjuh, sometimes when people do dhikr, they go into a state of, like some of the companions, when they recited the Quran, they would faint or they would, lose consciousness and things. So one of the scholars, I think it was I think it was Imam Junaid al-Baghdadi. He was asked about somebody who went into a state of, he heard a verse of the Quran and he fainted, and he went to Wajd as well, which is like he went to a state of exaltation and heightened state of spiritual experience, and then he fainted. And then Junaid al-Baghdadi said, read to him the same verse that he heard when he fainted. And the person recited it to him, and he woke up. Slowly he woke up. And they asked Junaid, how did you know that? He said, because it's like the qamis of Yusuf. The qamis of Yusuf, the shirt of Yusuf. The thing that caused his, Yaqub's eyesight to disappear was his brothers coming with the shirt of Yaqub, of Yusuf alayhi salatu wasalam, bidam min kadhib, with blood on it, and that caused him to lose his eyesight. But the thing that caused him to regain his eyesight was when the Prophet Yusuf's inni la'ajidu riha Yusuf, I sensed the smell of Yusuf, and it brought his eyesight back. So this is like lata'if, but there also indicates that some people have insight into the Quranic text through reflection, which then allows them to utilize it in ways that we've just never attempted to do. A very superficial, a very bland approach to the Quran is to recite for no other reason than to rack up the verses or something. That's I believe is a very superficial way of looking at the Quran. So this is why the communication of the Quran is so important. Reflection is so important, to try and connect verses one with another. Very few of the commentators of the Quran actually do that. Most commentators, because of the nature of tafsir, they just try and keep each verse by itself and indicate the grammar of it, the morphology, the syntax, the basic meaning, the context. That's it. They don't try and connect the literary form of it. And there's some, Imam Bukhari famously did try to do that. Ibn Ashur was famous for also trying to do that, or doing that as well. So there are people that have tried and attempted to do that. But then it's only once you're in the field of a problem and you have to reflect and look for an answer, that you need to then reflect and then take the answer out at the moment that you need it. So a manual is very difficult, because the manual is only of use when you're actually facing the difficulty, like a car manual to fix a car. It's on the shelf, it's not used until you need it. And at that point, your time is short and you don't have the time to reflect. And you basically will make lots of mistakes. Like in state of, an attack of an enemy, how are you going to be able to contain your strategy or create your strategy unless you've internalized the strategy itself? Like you are, like the Prophet was, internalized the Quran. And at that point, his seerah and his sunnah was essentially the Quran in action, in motion. The poetry of the Quran was in motion in the Prophet ﷺ, which is why everything he did was ajib. Everything he did was full of amazement, because everything that came out of him and his decisions was a reflection of the fact he'd completely absorbed the knowledge of the Quran, which is why Ibn Taymiyyah, he says that, he was asked about the knowledge of the Prophet ﷺ, and he said, is there any limits? And he says, how can there be a limit to that knowledge of the Prophet ﷺ when he was given the knowledge of the Quran? And Allah says, وَعَلَّمَكَ مَا لَمْ تَكُنْ تَعْلَمْ, and we taught you what you did not. وَكَانَ فَضْلُ اللَّهِ عَلَيْكَ عَظِيمًا, and the beneficence and majesty of your Lord upon you was immense. If God is saying it's immense, it means there's no end to it. So the problem here is we don't have a daily interaction with the Quran. We want it for the moment of stress, the moment of difficulty, the moment of need. And you can't come in cold. It's like, before a football match, you see the players warming up before athletics meet. You see every move, and warming up the muscles, making sure they don't get injured, because they have to go in, as they say, hitting the ground, running. You go in cold, you'll get injured. And essentially that's our problem. Nobody listening is contesting the Quran has amazing insights. What we contest and we are lamenting is the fact that nobody makes use of it until after the event. So everything happens, we come to the part afterwards.
Yeah, it's probably not just the insight. It's just transforms the way you think, you approach life.
Yeah, so it's not. That's my point. It's not the insight. It's not the one individual thing.
Yeah,
it's how you're approaching. It's like certain people you meet and you realize that their approach to life is completely different. That's what makes them different. Is this the way they view life? There's not essentially a difference between you and them in terms of skill set, in terms of impetus or intention or get up and go. There's exactly the same, but there's a different way of approaching life. The different way of perceiving life, opportunities, they see them and they take them. Whereas, there's something that, holds us back from utilizing that, our skill set.
And close proximity to Quran, trying to understand Quran the way it should be understood.
So this is the problem, isn't it? Because, you could finish the tafsir of these two chapters in easily 10 minutes. I probably do it in 10 minutes comprehensively. But unless you stew the pot and you allow it naturally to come to the forefront and connect with your mind, and then the penny clicks on each point, you won't actually, it's like I was making pasta this morning. No, it was this afternoon actually. You can throw everything in and you can put it in the oven, but there's a reason why you spend 5 minutes with the onions, then put the garlic in, then put the carrots in, then you blend them, and then you put something else in, then you put this in. You could put everything in the beginning, but the result is a complete disaster. And that's because everything needs to mature. And that's related to do with adab. Adab is manners with everything that you're doing, everything in its right place, treating everything in its proper due. Whether you're cooking, whether you're dealing with diplomacy, politics, everything at its right time, everything in its right place. Everybody dealt with in the way that they should be. And that's what the Quran does. The Quran treats the Quraysh as they should be, threat and then softness. It treats every single person in exactly the way that they need to be. And then we see that in the seerah of the Prophet ﷺ as well. The strength and then the softness, strength, softness. In need, at a point where he needs to do that, he does it. At a point when he needs to use wisdom, he does it. At a point where he needs to use strength, he does it. ﷺ. And so that is a state of mind. It's not insight. It's not like the 100 top insights from the
Yeah.
Quran. Imagine
Yeah.
I could write that book, 100 top insights of the Quran. You could read it, top seller. The question is applying it and creating a mindset. You could read it and you could create a mindset. Yeah, and there's all these books like Atomic Habits and 40 rules for this and 12 rules for that. Yeah, but you have to live it. You can't just read it. You have to embody it as well. And I think that's the task of everybody who's trying to connect with the Quran is they need to really insist that it's going to transform the way they think, connecting, reflecting. And inshallah, at that point, the effect on the life of the person is different from, just reading it for just barakah, as we say.
Alam tara kaifa fa'ala rabbuka bi ashabil fil. So Surah Fil and Surah Quraysh are these two surahs, inshallah, we'll be reflecting on for the coming episodes as well. This is all we have from a reflections program today. We seek your du'as when you're making dua for yourself. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Alaikum salam wa rahmatullah.